Good. Welcome everyone to tonight's Hudson School Board work session. We will start off tonight with a report from Bonnie regarding the budget update annual meeting coming up.
So we're gonna go through the 2025 annual report. So I think everybody has a copy, hopefully, no? Or it's on the agenda. The first couple of pages are just the agenda for the annual meeting. We updated the strategic plan. So Tracy put that on there. She did a really nice job formatting that. So that's outlined on page 2 and 3. An introduction to the Board of Education and the administration of the district. So that's in there as well. A list of our program and supervisors in the district for the community. Topics covered, so that's what we're going to go over tonight. Budget challenges, and then we're going to start on the next page, which is our major assumptions. So the state has adopted their 2025-27 operating budget. We did have an increase to the revenue limit calculation at $325 per pupil. State aid per pupil aid was set at $742 per pupil, so that was no increase, but also no decrease. Special education categorical aid is estimated to increase to 42%. That was currently 30%. That was very appreciative by the district. Unfortunately, with the equalization aid formula, because we are a very property wealthy district, we are projected to lose about $750,000 of equalization aid. The majority of the decrease is tied to our declining enrollment, increased property value growth, and the distribution of aid formula to districts throughout the state. Again, this is just an estimate. We'll get our final allocation October 15th, and then we'll report that to the district. We did just get our estimated property value increase. So last year we were at 6.69% increase. This year it's estimated to be at 4.4%. We will get the final number of that, but typically about the last week in October. The state average growth as of right now is 8.07, so a little bit below the state average. Over the past 3 years, the district has made about $2.7 million of operating reductions for staffing. This last year, $842,000 in reductions. We have reported settlements with all of our employment groups, so those are all finalized and in the budget. We do have a formal accepted offer on the UU property. We anticipate closing on that during the school year. And then currently the district office on Brocky Drive is currently for sale. And honoring the district or the community's input to reduce our district footprint. So the district office will be moving over to the middle school in a couple of weeks. The next page is a preliminary summary, just some things I wanted to highlight in revenue. If you look at the first one, property taxes 211, there does show last year for Fund 10, we are at $46 million. And this year we are estimating that that'll go up to $53 million. Please recognize that that's not an increase to our total property tax increase. We're taking money that we levied in our debt service and pushing that over to Fund 10. So although it says a 14% increase, it's pretty much relative to where we were last year for the property taxes. It's just two different funds. And then if you go down to expenditures in the 300 under other purchase services, you'll see a 158% increase, and that'll be the funding of the remaining construction projects, the $15 million that the board allocated in the fund balance. So again, we will be operating in a deficit this year of $13.7 million, but that is due to the board's allocation of the fund balance to finish those referendum projects. The bottom of that page kind of outlines the different areas of our fund balance. Get Kids Ahead initiative, we did spend all of that, so we will unrestrict that in our fund balance. Our E-rate rebates, so those are rebates we receive as part of our technology plan. We did not spend it all last year, so we've designated that for next year. Indicator 14 incentive grant, we are rolling that from last year to this year. We have a school-based mental health grant allocation, so we're rolling that over as well. And then Career Tech Ed Incentive, Act 59, those are funds that we receive for kids who participate in youth apprentice programs. And we get that money the last week in June, so we can't really spend it, so we roll that over for them to use that. They plan to utilize that to update the welding labs at the high school this summer. So that's what those funds were used for. In our committed, we have our self-funded health fund balance. We kept that at 2.9 million. Our capital fund balance, that's the $15 million that we talked about. And non-spendable, those are things that cross fiscal years. So we have about $181,000 in that. We cleared out our property insurance hail claim, so we have nothing remaining in the assigned area for that. And we have $151,000 unassigned or assigned for the governor's back to school aid. So as of the end of this year, we are or at the end of the 24-25 school year, our projected unassigned fund balance would be $30,966,220. And typically we have that to utilize for our cash. So we don't have to do any short-term borrowing. The next one is kind of a history of our aid membership. This is a historical perspective. If you look at that light blue, that indicates when we added 4K as a district. So that it helped our declining enrollment, but as you can see, we are still declining in our K-12 enrollment. The bottom graph shows a general fund state aid revenue. As you can see from this year to last year, or from last year to this year, we are reducing our state aid by about that $700,000. Next page. The next page goes over revenues from last year to this year. As we talked about previously, the local sources does take a jump from last year to this year, and that's really that shifting of debt service levy into Fund 10. So the percentage is actually relatively the same, but because we increased the levy for debt service, we reduced debt service levy and increased Fund 10 levy. The next page compares the expenditures from last year to this year. Again, it is kind of skewed because the salaries decrease because our purchase services for the construction projects in the 300 increased by that 15 million. And the other one that you might notice in the interfund transfer, we were 12% last year, down to 8.94%, and that was due to the increase in the special education aid percentage this year. This page outlines the benefit of having new construction in the district. By township on the bottom, you can see that the town of Troy was actually had the biggest increase of new construction at 6%, but overall the district did increase just based on new construction about $115 million. This page, page 15, outlines a historical valuation and levy and the mill rate. Again, 2025-26 are estimated at this time, so an increase in property value of 4.35%, but the mill rate will remain the same. We are anticipating at 8.25. And then at the bottom, we break it down by taxing district within the district. And if you can see, the town of Troy has actually had the biggest change in value at 10.14%. The next pages are the actual operating budget that we submit to the state of Wisconsin. It's basically what we just went over, but this is the legal document that we're required to adopt it in the format for the state. And then this also includes all of our funds. So Fund 10, the bottom of page 18 is the debt service fund. So you can, I don't know if he's up there. At the bottom section is debt service fund. You can see last year our levy for debt service was 12.8 million, and this year it's 8.9 million. So that levy went down, Fund 10 went up. So relatively between the two, it's about the same, but that's the change.
And that was planned. I mean, we've
That was
done that.
planned by the board.
Yep. In order to maintain a levy rate so that we could prepay some debt and not see a huge increase in people's taxes if the referendum passed in April.
The next page, goes over the capital project fund, which is at the top. So that would be our fund, that would be the referendum. So as you can see, we spent $28 million last year. We have about $900,000 left. And then we'll go to the $15 million in the Fund 10. The next area is the food service fund. We're anticipating breaking even at the 2.5 million for next year, and then our community service fund. We are going to use some of our fund balance for community service, but operating budget about $2 million. This is just a snapshot of our projected balance sheet at the end of a fiscal year, the top part, and then the second part is our trust that we've set up to fund post-retirement benefits for our employees. So as of right now, we have about $1.9 million set aside for post-retirement benefits for our staff. Go to the next page. The next page outlines the long-term debt for the district. And then on the far right-hand column goes over the 2025-26 tax levy. So the required scheduled principal and interest is 8.1 million. We have a prepayment that we have budgeted for of 720,000, so a total levy of 8.9 million for the fiscal year. And then if you look on the left side, it does show the total debt. We've received a couple questions about the payment of how much for each borrowing, and that's broken down by each borrowing.
And so and we'll add some labels to that so people know what that debt was issued for.
Correct.
So the 7.7 million, that has to do with, I think, the middle school from 2016. The 72.35 million was when we took the second issue of debt. And then we had the 9.5 million was the last, instead of doing the last 10 million of that $90 million bond referendum in 16. And then the 24,120,000 is from the most current referendums. Because some people have asked us, are we still paying on Rivercrest, or are we still paying on Willow or things like that? No, we're not. This is our outstanding debt schedule and what we have.
And if you look at the payment note for the 24 million, that was actually for our most recent referendum. The referendum was actually for 29 million. So we've already reduced that down to 24 million starting. And we're down to by the end of last year, we were at 19 million. So a lot of that has been paid off. The next page is a comparison chart of mill rates. These are based on last year's mill rates because we don't have everybody's mill rates for this upcoming year. We are at 8.21 from last year, and that is all districts that are in CISA 11. And the last page is the proposed resolution for the annual meeting. It breaks down the general fund levy of 53 million, the debt service of 8.9 million, and then the community service fund of 425,000. And then that would be asked to be approved at the annual meeting. The remaining pages in the book are is kind of a definition of terms to kind of help you with our budget. I don't know if we want to go through all that, but if you have any questions, I'm definitely here to answer those.
Mr. President,
Molly?
is this on? Can you hear me? Okay. On page 13, I just want to make sure I understand this correctly. This is where you have the expenditures, a little pie chart, and the proposed budget. And you were talking, I was taking notes, so I might have fallen behind. So it's typical for me. Purchase services, 13 million last year, and now it's 30 million. And you were saying that includes the 15 million that we're taking from savings to pay for the construction. Is that what it is? Is there some way we can have that noted in there? So
Megan called as well, so I think we're
Okay.
going to do some notes on this and add some disclaimers with stars for the annual meeting.
right, so that it doesn't look like somehow we're buying a lot more toilet paper or something.
Yep, no,
Okay,
that was
cool.
a really good point.
Mr. President. Bonnie, on page 9, quick question, you list two numbers of what the district has done in terms of budget reductions, 842,000 and then 2.7. Is the 2.7 million inclusive of the 842, or is the 842 in addition to the 2.7 million?
It's included in.
It's included in. Could we rephrase that to just say it's
Yep.
all like by adding this, we now have achieved like a total of 2.7 million?
Yep.
And then my next question, just out of curiosity, on page 11, the 4K enrollment, is that across all sites or just district sites?
All sites.
All sites. Thank you.
Do you think it would be helpful to put the budget reductions? We have a summary of that to add that to the booklet.
Mhm.
Okay. Okay.
I do have it on that slide we can
Okay.
pull from.
And this will be on our website to review for people as well before. So there now, I assume, or
I don't think it's up there yet. We wanted to present it to you first.
I mean, it's attached to the agenda, which is on our
Correct.
website, so
Yep.
somebody can look at it that way. Yep.
Can I ask you another question, Bonnie?
Yep.
On page 15, we have the estimated equalization valuation. And you had said that there was 115 million in new construction in town of Troy. Is that where you go from the 2024 to 2025 valuation? That we get the 10.14%, increase? Is that how that happens?
The 115 million was actually at the bottom of
Am I looking at the wrong spot?
page 14. It's the total of the
Okay.
construction and all this.
Okay, so I guess I don't understand the page 15. Can you explain that a little bit more about how that's broken out between the districts and why between the municipalities and why, one is 10%, one is 3%? Why does that happen?
Sure. So equalized value is determined by the Department of Revenue. So they will come in and determine what your property value is by township. So it's not linked to assessed or anything like that. So we just get notified of what they have used their calculations to determine that. So we don't really have any participation in that.
Okay, that's clear.
Okay.
So there's a couple numbers here, though. I just don't want you to get confused on. So the new construction estimate is different than the overall taxable valuation increase. New construction is just pure new construction increase, but then there's also appreciation increase that comes as well. And that is included in the amount on page 15. That's all valuation. Whereas on page 13, I think it's page 13, page 14, that's just taking into account new construction.
Correct.
Thanks.
Mr. President,
yes, ma'am.
Bonnie, this is always so confusing for me, this equalized value. So, when I look at the bottom of page 15 and it has, so the equalized value is determined by the State Department of Revenue, so that it's not, like you said, based on, did Town of Troy do assessments more recently than Town of Hudson?
Correct.
But then the levy per taxing district, so if the city of Hudson is taxed, or the levy is 27 0.1 million, then they tax it based on however they have the valuation of the homes, which
Correct.
we have no control
We
over
give
whatsoever.
them the big amount and then they divvy it out based on the assessed value of their township.
Okay,
And the biggest reason for that is because municipalities don't all assess at the same time. And they get out of whack. And so sometimes people say, my house got reassessed. I'm really worried about my school tax bill. The assessment is not the tax bill for us. Ours is equalized value. It's a number that should go up in your top right corner pretty consistently every year. It goes up, set by the state. The assessed value usually only goes up whenever the municipality decides to reassess. So all of a sudden you could go 4 or 5 years and not have your assessment go up, and then all of a sudden it shoots up. And I think the other thing is as Bonnie was talking about, that equalized value, the state does that so that you don't have one municipality that says, we're gonna keep our values really low so that our people don't have to pay as much in taxes as another municipality. The only two entities, well, actually, there's three entities that use equalized value. It's school districts, it's tech colleges, and county government, because it's any entity that spans multiple municipalities.
Any other questions for Bonnie? Thank you very much, Bonnie.
Thank you.
We'll move on to Andrea with personal hires. And
Yes, so this is typically part of the consent agenda at a regular board meeting, but this time of year we are hiring people like crazy. So we're bringing it forward today with our hires, intakes, and resignations and all of that. Hopefully the board will approve the board pack as presented.
any questions for Andrea? If not, I'd accept a motion to.
Mr. President, I make a motion to approve the hiring document.
Thank you, Maria.
second,
Second by Maria. Thank you very much. All those in favor, say aye. Oh,
Aye.
all those opposed, say nay. Hearing none, it passes. Moving on to construction update.
Yeah,
Nick hasn't lost any sleep over this in the last
Yeah,
few
it's we're cranking along. There's no pictures on this one around. Those are usually provided by our construction management group. But the buildings, been to all of the buildings twice today. They are in great shape. The open house for the middle school went really well. That was on Thursday. And there's obviously some things that still need to be cleaned up and finished up in all three buildings, but they're definitely ready for school tomorrow. A big thank you goes out to our custodial staff, our teaching staff who was working in the weekend, and custodial staff, our technology staff. They had to get the infrastructure back up and running so people could connect to the infrastructure as we work through, and also to the construction teams. They were working long hours the last few weeks. Some of their subcontractors were working 6-10-hour days. Some were working 7-10s the last few weeks in order to get everything done. And so there will still be things that need to be finished up over the next 3 or 4 weeks. But the buildings are ready to go. The outsides, those will be happening over the next few weeks as well. But it was a lot of fun at Meet the Teacher Night, both Thursday night at the middle school, and then tonight made it over to North Hudson and also DP Rock. And just when the kids walked into the buildings and got to see the spaces, they were excited. And so that's a lot of fun. And what was also fun is these construction workers, these men and women that are working so hard on these buildings, and they're still there working on them, and they're listening to the kids go, this is amazing, and things, and you kind of see a smile kind of come on their face, like, wow, this has been pretty worth it. It's pretty fun when you get to see the community engage with them. And so yeah, I mean, we're motoring along. We're not 100% done by any means, but we are definitely in a good spot. All the fire safety systems are up and running, intercom systems, technology systems, everything we need to have a safe, orderly start to school tomorrow. So we're in a really great spot. So any questions about construction?
Maria.
You do. Nick, quick question. Do we have an estimate of when they're going to be, 100% complete, filled out, like a roadmap on each of the buildings? I know they've been working hard. I saw them at North Hudson during Pepperfest working over the weekend. So I get it. The construction workers are putting in extra hours to bring this across the finish line. Just do we have a date when they're going to be out of the buildings and they're completely are back in the hands of the administrators and teachers and students?
Yeah, I mean, I would say over the next 3 or 4 weeks, we'll still have construction workers in the buildings at different times. The punch list items, which is going in and fixing items that weren't quite done or, some odds and ends, things along those lines, will happen over the next 3 to 4 weeks. The district office space, gets turned over to the district, I think, the 12th of September. So it's about 3 weeks out. But I think, for the most part, would think by the 1st of October, there really shouldn't be anything left. I mean, they should be all out of those buildings. One of the things that's a challenge right now, and they're standing by it, is the controls on the HVAC system. So that the automation's not quite completely set up. And so they are having an individual that is actually stationed at each of the buildings until it's fully automated, because sometimes you have to actually go and manually adjust things in rooms and things like that. And so they're the controls contractor is doing that as well. So that may be control issues all the way until October by the time they get commissioned and balanced and everything else. But yeah, I feel pretty comfortable thinking that, by about the first or second week in October, we would be done. We'll probably try to have an open house space for all three of the buildings, so people can get an opportunity to see them and see them finished. So
I would echo Nick on thanks to the teachers getting their rooms ready under these conditions, and the custodial staff and support staff working hard to make this happen. And also in regards to HVAC controls and things like that, it's not uncommon that we'll be dealing with balancing through this entire winter, just because it's new buildings, new systems, basically. So not out of the ordinary on that. Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Nick. Moving on back to Nick with goals and reviews.
So I'm going to turn this over kind of to each of the directors that have their goals to we're going to spend the first, few minutes talking about kind of how we finished the year, related to our district goals and how we got there. And then our next item on the agenda is a preview as to what the goals are to come for this coming year. So to start off, I'll turn it over to Shannon and Tara for the first area.
Yeah, I can speak to the first couple. We had a goal of 65.6% of students in grades 3 through 11 will demonstrate proficiency in ELA, and our results came in just under 64%. We're working on some action steps to exceed that even for next year. And in math, our goal was 65.5% of students in grades 3 through 11 will demonstrate proficiency in math, and we came in at 69.9. So exceeding that goal. And a few of our buildings were above 80 or hovering just under 80. So we did really well in math.
And I can take the subgroups so they match what Shannon just shared in the areas of English language arts and math. So we'll look at English language arts first. In the 3 subgroups we decided on were the students with disability. Our baseline was 25 and our results came in at 29%. Our next subgroup was students of color. We had a baseline of 46 and our results came just below and 44%. That was a group that the year before had about a 9% jump. And then last in the ELA category, we had economically disadvantaged students, our free and reduced lunch. Our baseline was 44 and our results came in, we stayed the same. And then switching to math, same subgroup, students with disability, baseline 27, our results came in at 33. For students of color, our baseline was 49, results 60. And then economically disadvantaged students, our baseline was 48 and results came in at 46.
I think it's important to note, especially on 1.1 and 1.2, people will say, what is 65% of the kids proficient? That doesn't seem like a very lofty goal. It's proficient is not the same as, having the ability to read. And there's a difference there. And the cut scores in Wisconsin are very high. Just to understand that if we would have hit on ELA, 65.6% proficient, we'd be in the top 7% of all districts in the state as a K-12, or 3 through 11, I mean. And then 65% puts us in the 91st percentile for math. So it's a little misleading, because when you look at some of that stuff, You think, how can you have a goal that's only going up by 3% if there's that many more to go? We will continue to push, and you'll see that on our next year's goals. But it's an important note that we started adding what percentile would that put us in if we hit those goals. So.
Mr. President, I just wanted to say kudos. It's the excitement on the math increase. That's huge. And was a lot of that driven by the increases in the middle school math, or?
A lot of it was middle school, their jump, but we did have one building that was over 80 and two that were just under 80%. So that helps too.
Aaron?
I just want to go back to this 65.6%. I'd really like some rationale as to how we come up with that number in general. Like how do we determine like 60? I understand there's a difference between proficiency and kids being able to read, or math and kids being able to do math, but what is the rationale behind only saying 65.6%? And my second question is probably not going to be a super popular one, but I kind of have to ask it here. Is these percentages, well, I want to celebrate the win here because this is a win and there is proficiency increases. How does this take into account the lowering standards that happened in DPI with all of the proficiencies across the state?
Yep. So I can handle the first question for you. So 65.6% is a 3% increase over last year's 62.6%. And so the board last year, when going through this, they said they'd like to see a 3% increase as the goal. And so that's how all of the percentages got set, was based on the baseline amount and then adding 3 percentage points to all of them all the way through.
So how do we get to 80%?
What's that?
How do we get to 80 or 90%?
Yeah, you mean as a district? Or,
yeah, as a district. I mean, 65% is great, but I mean, it'd be awesome if we had 80, 90, really 100% of kids, right, that are proficient and can read. I understand there might be some learning disabilities and other things in there that prevent that, but I mean, we're Hudson, we're the best, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think some of the highest performing districts in the state, most affluent highest performing districts are in the upper 70s right now, and continuing to strive to go up as we are. And so having a 3% increase in proficiency when you're already in the 90 plus percentile those are heavy lifts, just to get those. And our goal, so we would be, this coming year, like for math, for example, we'd be setting a goal in the 70s. And in ELA, we'd just be below 70. So, I mean, we want to get there. But, our long-term goals and conversations that we've had as a district and with the board has been trying to get into the 95th percentile of all school districts in the state. But knowing that we're not necessarily going to get there all in 1 year. So that's where we've been trying to chunk away at about 3% a year to get there.
Thank you.
And to Aaron's point, I think it would be good to show like what are the the percentage that the highest performing schools in this districts in the state have, just to compare it to us. Because say to think, well, I'm sure some of them are at 80%. Well, it sounds like no, they're in the high 70s or 85, or why can't we be there? So I think that'd just be some good data point to have added.
And I can speak to our long-term goals, around 70% in ELA and 75% in math. Those are sort of our long-term goals. And based on this year's data, that would put us in the 95th percentile. Each year, the percentile change depend on how the districts perform.
Mr. President?
Yes, Megan.
And this is based on the forward exam the kids take in the spring, right? Or
this is actually it's based on the forward exam, the ACT exam, and the
pre-ACT
exam. Okay. Because at the high school they take pre-ACT and ACT, and then grades 3 through 8 take forward.
So I think part of it for me too is to remember this is a snapshot of one exam of the students learning too. So it's important. We want to keep moving it up, but like kids who have test anxiety, or you just don't feel well that day. Like there's all of that's going to factor in. I'm not trying to make an excuse for anything, but I think we all know standardized tests don't measure everything or encompass everything for student learning. So I'm all on board with keeping to try and increase it as much as possible. But to your point, Erin, it's a 1 day measurement or the multiple days of a kid's learning on a standardized test. Am I making sense? You know, it's not like their grades or how their teacher says they're doing. So I just think it's important for me to keep
I
that in
would
mind.
strongly disagree with that measurement if that's how we're measuring students, because I agree with what you're saying. That's unfair, but I don't know that we should be measuring proficiency based off of just one test. I mean, teachers do reporting and, they have an overall in their classrooms. I would think that that would come into play somewhere here. Would make sense.
Mr. President, um, I wonder if at some point as we think about setting the new goals, knowing that within buildings, the administrators work with teachers to set building goals and plans and review data both at the classroom and building level, to kind of just walk through what that looks like and how that's reviewed time over time and goals are set and achieved within buildings in service of our larger district goal, and how that process of data review with individual teachers, grade levels, sections. I know there's a lot that goes on into that, and that's a really rich process. And I think that's informative as well to kind of help us understand how we continue to make forward movement in this area and where our pinch points really are to get bigger goals and have, bigger leaps. And I think the other piece is we have the new science of reading that is kind of coming into play and being rolled out. And my suspicion is that's going to have some impact in our elementaries and cascading up as well. So I'll be curious to see what that progress looks like over time.
I think that's something that we can continue to talk about and update the board on that process too. And just to note, when we look at the data, we have buildings that are exceeding, we have grade levels that are exceeding these goals. And we have pockets of maybe it's a grade level, maybe it's a building that we, have action steps around. So yeah.
Okay, Nick, we'll move on to 25,
Okay.
26.
We got just the
Oh.
two other areas we want to touch on.
Okay.
Yep.
Oh, but my computer just turned off. Okay, so my goal for our team was to achieve a 20% increase in the percentage of staff who feel they know what is expected of them in their role and feel part of the district community. We surveyed and rounded with new staff at the beginning of the year for a baseline, and then focus on how to really improve the onboarding processes and engagement with, especially with veterans during the course of the year. As HR department and working collaboratively with our onboarding committee, we've been working hard to enhance and systematize practices based on staff feedback and then analyze best practices and implement where appropriate. Everything from veteran ambassador events like the Winter Social to individual support and conversations with staff. We then conducted a final survey of continuing new certified staff in June, and the result was a 26.08% increase in staff who feel that they know what is expected of them and feel part of the community.
Our last area is our community. Tracy, if you want to take that one.
So the last goal here is we knew we were going into a year where we wanted to communicate what we were doing with our strategic plan and also with the referendum. So our goal was to hold at least 6 in-person community meetings with a target attendance of 300 constituents. We provided 15 in-person opportunities for the community to learn and ask about the referendum and the strategic planning process, with just over 305 constituents who attended those community events.
And then if you go to the 25-26 goal preview, so it looks a little different than the current goal structure. is because our strategic plan has changed. So before our goals were around our students, our staff, and our community, because it was kind of the three pillars of our strategic plan. Now we have our kind of our areas of focus with our new strategic plan for the 25 to 30 strategic plan, and it's focused around educational excellence and academic achievement, well-being with mental health supports, partnerships with family engagement, and operations with community and industry connections. And if you remember, and we talked about this at the last board meeting, our strategic plan really came from the community conversation that we had in the spring of 24. And we wanted to make sure that not only were we capturing what people were saying in 2024, that they understood that there was something that was actionable. And so then what also we wanted to make sure happened is as we write our new goals, we're tying them back to which parts of our strategic plan are they addressing, so that we can specifically see, okay, are we measuring things within our strategic plan? How is that going? What are we doing with that? And so I will turn it over to each of the areas to kind of give a preview of what we have planned for this year.
Okay, and from my department, we're looking for 66% of our students in grades 3 through 11 demonstrating proficiency in ELA, and 72% of students in grades 3 through 11 demonstrating proficiency in math. And then keeping in mind our long-range plan of short-term plan of 70 and 75 in those areas.
And then you're looking at the same subgroups we went over. The baseline is the goal data I just shared, and same, the 3 percentage points for each of those subgroups in ELA and math would be the goal.
Okay, and then I have the well-being mental health supports, the increase the percentage of full-time staff who know of available wellness and well-being supports and understand how to access them by 15%. So we'll start with a baseline survey this fall and then look for a 15% improvement.
And in the family engagement, we're looking to increase engagement with post-secondary planning by 25% for families with children in grades 9 through 11. And we know that our students fill out those forms and the information on what they would be good at, but we're finding that the parents don't necessarily see that or engage in that process. So it's one of the things we're looking at.
In the operations section, we are going to make a great effort to enhance access to our school facilities, especially the improvements, and have usage increase by 5% for the 25-26 school year.
Additionally, within that area, we want to provide clear and timely information regarding decisions and initiatives with an average website update timeframe of 48 hours. So primarily that's making sure our community knows the actions that are being taken by the board and any other big initiatives that we are moving forward with.
Any questions on the 25-26 goals?
Yep, I have a question.
Mhm.
I think last year when we went through the 24-25 goals,
Mhm.
the board we were typically doing a 2% ask for growth. And I think we asked for 3.
Mhm.
And I don't know if there's any reason why we wouldn't ask for 3.
No, we can change the top 2 goals to 3. Is that what you're talking about? Yeah, absolutely.
Anybody else have any thoughts?
Megan?
I always have thoughts, sorry. We've seen like the growth in math here this past year was incredible. And then we had, good growth in, 1.9, 1.3 percentage points, I guess, in English language arts. But I find have difficulty balancing between, do we want to set a goal that is so high every year that it can feel like, wow, you guys didn't make it to teachers, like asking for big leaps and bounds each year? Or do we plot away at the 2 percentage points? It's hard to know what the right action is. I feel like, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah, I
asking
totally
for,
know what you mean. I guess I feel like in a way it will be what it will be. That we know that our teachers are great and the kids are great and they're going to work hard. there's no reason to not say, let's set the goal high. And if they don't get it, is there a punishment? I mean,
Well, yeah, if it's a goal or a stretch goal, you know,
what was that?
stretch goals are okay, but with an understanding that there's, it's not a,
There's no
like you said,
punishment for someone not, I mean, we know it's a big reach.
Kate,
I agree with Molly. I think there's certainly nothing wrong with reaching higher. I think that's what Hudson is. I'll never forget when I decided to run for the school board, I sat with Nick and he said that, we're good. We want to be great. We want to be the best. So I think aiming high is always where we want to be.
Aaron?
I think that smaller class sizes and making sure that us as a board that we're helping to manage, letting our admin team manage the number of kids in classrooms is going to make a very large impact on these numbers. At the end of the day, we know that smaller class sizes have much more success rate in being able to have kids being more proficient. And that has definitely been proven and really is being led by the Holton group of families and school over there. They've done an incredible job with that. And I would really like to see us be able to replicate something, whatever it is that they're doing over there is clearly working. So to be ensuring that we can replicate that over and keeping the class sizes as small as we can moving forward with whatever moves forward.
Maria?
Yeah, so I'm assuming we've had these goals for a number of years, like year over year, we've been tracking these, and correct?
Well, we always, the academic goals are always, so we're always looking at math and reading. I mean,
Yep.
that's our main focus.
Those two.
And then we always want to look at there's three subgroups. We used to also look at English language learners as well. The problem with looking at that as a subgroup is there's so much transientness of that group that it was fluctuating so much. Like it would be up 20% one year and down 10, and it wasn't. We would have kids that weren't with us full academic year, and so that's why we focused on these three subgroups with also then math and ELA, because it really is the most important thing we do.
Super helpful. I think where I'm going with this is maybe creating a visual that just says, so we can see the progress that's been made over time, not just a snapshot of 1 year to 1 year, but kind of over time, because sometimes that gives us a bigger picture of the leaps and bounds that may be happening. And I think that's important to recognize. And I'm going to double back down and say, I think it's the coupling it with giving those more repeated feedback to the board about progress and the work that's happening within the building levels to say, here's how we're translating this into actionable steps within the resources that we have, and identifying pinch points. Because if there's something that's preventing you from saying, we can take that next step, here's what we need, well, let's have that conversation. But we can't have that until we identify it. So just looking for a little bit more meat to the conversation, because otherwise we're kind of guessing at what is our relative success and what is the barrier. And I'd like to see more tangible there.
Absolutely. And, throughout the course of the year, you will have different presentations from the different curricular groups and the principals. There will also be coming up after we finish the strategic, the scorecard action plans. You'll see how that lays out. What are the action steps in order to to push all these things forward? Every building has a plan set up. Every department has a plan set up. So those come at different times throughout the year. And that's to kind of give you the backstory on this. It's kind of which one should come first, type of thing. And a lot of it depends on, how long people have been on board. Because if you've been on the board, you'd be like, okay, I remember doing this in October. But if you've only been on the board since April, then you'd be like, okay, we haven't had that discussion yet. And so, I think and we can start to work to maybe change when that flows in the year so that it makes sure that it happens maybe a month or two before this discussion so you guys can see all those plans. What's happening right now and what's been happening the last month has been where buildings and departments have been working with their teams to create those action plans for the school year. And part of one of the first steps in that is setting what are the goal areas, so we're all rowing in the same direction. And so, but yeah, we can set up in the next month or two going through and on a deep dive of what our scorecard action plans look like, so that you guys can kind of see what that process is. Absolutely. Any other questions?
Megan?
Mr. President, I just wanted to say, I really like to see the new goals under 2, 3, and 4 here. I think they're great. And it's a lot to say we're gonna get everything up on the website within 48 hours. So that's an ambitious goal, and I thank you. Thank you for being so ambitious with that, so to make sure people are informed.
Okay, moving on to long-term school planning, Nick.
All right, which I think is the reason why we have most people here and watching, maybe, is this part of the presentation. So the board, just to kind of go through this, the board asked me to put together a slide deck that kind of reviews a lot of the information we have reviewed and kind of how we are where we are. And then the big focus of tonight is also for the board to have a conversation about how you want to structure getting feedback from the community, what that looks like, and setting a date for that community feedback meeting as well. So if you'll just kind of bear with me as I kind of go through some of these slides, I know a lot of this may be repetitive. I'm well aware of that. I'm aware of it. It's not lost on me. So one of the things we want to look at, so the past timeline of events. So one of the things that people ask us to do is put together kind of a past timeline of events and how kind of we got to this, where we're at in this point. Not to read through all these things, but back in August of 21, we did the long range facility task force. We started having the conversation about what do we want to do with our facilities. And, that kind of went all the way through, into May, and into Olson. Actually, I think it went all the way into October of 22. We did hire Applied Populations Lab out of the University of Wisconsin-Madison to do a enrollment study for us. Their report in May essentially confirmed what we knew we were experiencing, which was declining student enrollment. In September of 22, we did a community engagement campaign highlighting our needs for our buildings, operational efficiencies, and also we talked about the declining student enrollment. There was a work session, I believe it was in August of 22. At that time, the board said we don't see a path forward with 6 buildings. It directed me to come with options for 4 buildings. And so that's what we put together with the facility committee, and that's what was being presented at the time. In October of 22, we had the budget forecast that were showing a growing budget deficit. We used the Baird model to start to look at, okay, in the short term, yes, things are fine, but it starts to snowball in a hurry. When you start to match declining enrollment and lack of state increases, it kind of creates the perfect fiscal storm. In April, the board then decided in December of 22, January of 23, that they'd go for 2 different referendums. One was a facility referendum to improve North Hudson, EP Rock, and the middle school. And at that time, the reason it was decided to do those 3 buildings is because the decision was made that long term, those 3 buildings would be operational in the district. And so we had to start biting off some of our facility needs in the district, and so that's why we went that direction. We also, the board also voted to take a referendum for $8 million reoccurring referendum in April at the same time. In April of 23, the referendum for facilities passed, actually by 53% to 47, and the operational referendum did not pass, and it was the exact opposite, 47-53. And so at that time, we had some continued discussions, and then in September of 23, we continued to review the updates and the projected budget deficits, and we started to look in between 23 and 25. We started to see some substantial deficits, totaling over 1.8 million, not knowing exactly what the state was going to do. Spring, summer of 24 started to roll along. Started looking at more enrollments, facility needs, projected budget deficits, with an agreement to move forward with an operational referendum in fall of 24. At that time, we went, instead of going with an $8 million referendum, we cut it down to 5, because that was, what we heard as feedback after the $8 million didn't pass is, could you shrink it down to a smaller amount, and that should help it pass. It got slightly better on it, but still did not pass. In fall of '24, we did also spend some time reviewing budgets with and without the passage of an operational referendum. When I say it slightly got better, I think it was like um, maybe 52.8, rounded to 53%, as you look at it, voted no. The community, so then from there in January, we had a community conversation to get feedback on budget adjustments. Because there were some serious budget challenges facing the district. And we got feedback on those different budget adjustments. You can find those documents, are still on our website. You can look at that and what they had to say. In winter of 25 or essentially January of 25, right after that meeting, the board decided to go to operational referendum. It was for a 6-year non-reoccurring basis. And I think the important piece, because there's a lot of misinformation out there, the board at the time, administration at the time, was very clear that this was not a referendum to maintain all of our school buildings. It was a referendum that was operational. It was to provide for general operations, maintenance, and staffing cost. And it would not negate the need for further discussion about potential school closures. We spent a lot of time making sure that people understood that, even though some people may not have understood it. That was very, very, very out there is by the district and by the administration. In April of 25, the operational referendum originally passed by 7 votes after a recount held by Kate. It was 6 votes. And so we did end up passing the operational referendum. It was by no means a mandate or anything along those lines. There was a tremendous amount of support in the district, but just still not huge margins or anything like that. So then that kind of led us to the discussion. We have an operational referendum that is only good for 6 years. So even though it's passed right now, and we talked about this prior to the referendum, the board more than likely will have to go back to the voters in 6 years to renew it, because when it runs out, we have a $5 million hole in our budget as we work forward. So when we get into the budget information and how do we get here and what information are we looking at, the current budget information, these are the budget projections that take us out to 2029, 2030 school year. These are inclusive of the $5 million operating levy. So if the referendum wouldn't have passed, basically you could add an additional, take $5 million off the revenues on each of these years. And you can see how we were staring by the time you got to 29-30, we were actually looking at close to an $8 million a year deficit. So there are still some financial challenges. So this current year, we're projecting somewhere around a $1.3 to $1.4 million surplus with the $5 million operating levy. And then it starts to go down. It starts to go down quite a bit. Now, again, nobody has a crystal ball. These are based on our best assumptions. These are based on having enrollment decreases of only about 50 students a year. This is also on maintaining the 325 pupil increase that the state, if they will continue to have that was through the governor's veto. Do you understand that if that 325 went away, that would add about a 1.5 to $1.8 million hole to our budget. So it's important that stays for the district. The per pupil categorical aid, and Bonnie talked about this in the budget document, keeps consistent because they did not raise it in the next biennium budget. It's locked in at 742, so it's not going up each year. It's a locked in amount. And then we were also basing our valuation growth on about 5%. As Bonnie showed you, we think it's actually going to be more like 4.4% when you look at taxable valuation. Any questions about kind of the updated, the budget projections? And you got to understand these are kind of moving targets because as the legislature changes things and as expenditures come in from other districts, we're all interconnected. So if other districts spend a lot at different times and they're heavily aided, that can impact how much state aid we get. Everything is interconnected because of the way the aid formula works. And so it's important to understand that. So when you start to look at those deficits, so people will start to say, well, yes, but you just got done saying 30 minutes ago that you have $30 million fund balance. And we do have a $30 million fund balance. But understand that we need to maintain at least a $20 million fund balance, which is about 25%, so that we don't end up needing to short-term borrow, which is equivalent to like a payday loan type of thing. We have to keep about $20 million on hand at any given time in order to make payroll and things like that, because we don't get our aid from the state and from property taxes. We don't get it every 2 weeks or every month. So we have to have a cushion to be able to, there are districts that don't have that cushion, and then they have to borrow money in order to do that. And then that's an expense because you have to pay interest on that money. They don't just give you that for free. And so when you start getting into some of these budget deficits, it doesn't take long within 4 or 5 years to start chunking away at that money and getting down below some of those targets as you work through it. Bonnie talked about this a little bit in her budget preview. We have made budget reductions. People say, well, you need to live within your means. You need to do more with less. And we have been trying to cut and reduce the budget and work through some of those things. So in the 23-24 school year, we did make about $800,000 worth of cuts. The 24-25 school year, we made almost $1 million worth of cuts. And this most recent school year, till everything kind of shakes out, it's about $1 million worth of cuts. So right around $2.9 million in cuts. And those are, you can see what positions we have reduced. We've reduced everything from teaching staff to administrative staff to support staff. We have made reductions. This next item here is called the budget staffing ratio. So sometimes people will say, it seems like all you're doing is cutting teachers, you're not cutting administrators, or you're not cutting support staff. I realize a lot of these charts are really small for people that are looking out there. You can pull up this presentation. It's on the website, and you can zoom in and the supporting documents as well. You can look at our enrollments. It's the enrollment at the top. If you look overall, our enrollment from 2017 to 2025 is down almost 7%. Our administration is down about 7.5%. Our support staff is down about 13.5%. Our licensed staff is down about 5%. So we've tried to keep the cuts as far away from the teaching staff as we can, but you can't help making cuts there. Overall, our total staffing is down 8.6%. Yet our student body enrollment's down about 6.8. So we have been cutting along the way to try to do this as we try to get these different pieces done. It's more and more of a challenge as we work through this.
Can I interrupt you,
Yep.
Nick? I already did it, so
Okay.
I tried to be polite about it, but
You're
I
fine.
don't know if it works. So I think with, the point you made about living within our means, when people say that, and I know we've talked about this a lot, but I just think it's good to come back to understanding that the per pupil revenue limit has not kept up with inflation, right?
Yep.
They decoupled it back in 2010, 2011.
Yep.
And if it had just stayed equal to inflation, we'd be getting
About
nearly
$15 million,
$3,000 more.
about $15 million more a year, and we wouldn't be having a lot of these conversations. Now, it's again that if it would have stayed that, somebody would have to come up with that 15 million more a year. There's no doubt about it. But yes, I mean, and so when we went to operational referendum, we were just trying to recover 5 of the 15 million to keep up with things. But I think everybody can understand that things are going up. Inflation is very real. We were getting there was a 2-year period. I think it was 2021, 22, 23 when we got 0% increases from the state, and that was the highest inflation we've had since the 80s, and we got zero new money. And so and even when inflation comes back under control, those increases are still built in to the budgets. It's not like we had deflation, and so you still have to pay for those things. And so there's definitely some challenges there as we work through it. Other questions? Okay. Now getting into where we are enrollment wise. So this slide, next slide. So people have asked elementary wise, what's our enrollment done? There's been a lot of information out there. There's been a lot of people that have made their own charts. There's been a lot of different information. So we went back to what was the enrollment in the buildings from 2000 to 2025. And what you can see is back in 2000 to 2001 school year, we had about 1,828 elementary kids. And that number climbed to its highest point, which was right around 2012. We had 2,600 elementary students. So we jumped, a substantial amount, almost 50% in about 12 years at the elementaries. And then it started, it was somewhat stable, and then it started to go down. And the enrollment has been in a downward trend, with the exception of maybe one anomaly year, ever since. And so, there's some information out there. There's some people out there that are trying to say, the board built Rivercrest too big, and now you're trying to account for that and all these different things. The thing that people have to understand with Rivercrest Elementary, it is 17 years old. It is not a building that we just built in the last 3 or 4 years. It's 17 years old. When the voters went to referendum, it was 2006. If you remember kind of the time frame in 2006, we were growing, everything was growing, everything was on fire. And if you look at the enrollment at EP Rock in 2006, 2007, well over 600 students in that building and well over 600 students in Hudson Prairie. Everything was kind of bursting. And for probably 4 or 5 years after Rivercrest opened, it continued to grow. It got even bigger. And so, I don't think it was the wrong move to add an elementary school when they added an elementary school, and nobody could have predicted the 2008 recession, and nobody could have predicted that birth rates after the 2008 recession would never recover, and they haven't. And I have a slide on that coming up. And so, a couple things people ask about with building enrollments, and there's linked to the document, is in 2018-19. Going into the 1920, I think, school year, I'm trying to remember exactly how it was, we reboundaried the district because we were in the middle of trying to figure out, we had elementaries that were starting to get up towards, get uncomfortable at EP Rock, and also Rivercrest was climbing. And so all the information, we hired a demographer to come out, and look and do an enrollment study, and all of the developments that were going to happen south of the interstate. The vast majority of them were going to happen south of the interstate. They talked to the developers, they talked to the cities, the municipalities, and they were going to happen. And a lot of that development did happen. It just didn't generate students. And so, when people say Rivercrest has had, their enrollment is way down compared to what it was, we purposely emptied Rivercrest and pushed kids north that were in Rivercrest boundaries so that we'd have room in Rivercrest as these developments came online, so we didn't have to add on to buildings and things like that. We could change the capacity. It has been on a pretty downward trend. If we continue to go through, if you go to the next slide, the capture rate here. This is the other thing that we get from people out there. They'll say, well, people are leaving the district because they don't like the district. And, they came to the Hudson School District, they don't like it, they're homeschooling, or they're going to the private schools. The reason I got to turn around is because my slide's not coming up. Let's see if I can get this way. Let's see here, slideshow. So what you see is the capture rate document. So we're required to track, because of compulsory attendance, every school age kid that lives within our attendance boundary, whether they're homeschooled, whether they're private school, whether they open enroll out, and we have to know where they're going. That's part of the state law. And so what you have here is you have what's a capture rate. In 2014, our capture rate was about 88%. So that means what percentage of kids that live within our attendance boundary actually go to Hudson School District? And we were about 88%. In January of 25, we were running about 85%. So about a 3% difference. It's gone up, it's gone down, it's kind of been, right in there. The only area that's had an increase increases over that time is homeschool. But people have to understand that a 50 student increase in homeschool doesn't account for the 900 student difference that we have in the district. And so that's even when you look at the percentage of students in the district and percentage of students that are attending the other programs, there's just not this. They're not going everywhere else. And so I think this is an important note that people have to understand is we do track all these kids. We do have some that open enroll. We have students that open enroll out. In that top chart, you can start to see those are cohort groups by color. So what you essentially can see, if you look at the bottom left-hand corner, a class that starts a kindergarten class, which is last year's 11th grade class, they started at 352. They're at 372. They were at 372 in January. And so we do have in-migration, that's called. That's when kids they move to the district after they start in kindergarten, so second grade, third grade, things along those lines. We usually have a substantial jump between 8th and 9th grade because that's when our two parochial systems feed into the high school. The last few years, the vast majority, I think almost all of our kids that are in both Trinity and St. Pat's have come to the high school. And so that's why you start to see some of that increase as well as when you look at that. But we're just not seeing the same immigration we used to see. And if you look at our kindergarten classes, we were in the low 300s to mid 300s, a lot of them. And if you start looking at some of the most recent kindergarten classes, they're barely over 300. And when we were graduating classes in the 470s, and part of this on those colored numbers don't show the open enrollment in. But when you're starting to graduate classes that are much higher than the classes that you're bringing in, that's how you end up with declining enrollment. So it's not as though people are coming and they're saying, oh, my third grade experience at Hudson, whatever school is terrible, I'm leaving. We're literally bringing in smaller classes than we're graduating. And it takes a lot of immigration in order to balance that out. We're just not getting the immigration we used to get. If we go to the next one. So I just wanted to pull a couple slides from Applied Populations enrollment projections. And these are slides, they're snapshots of their slides. And the entire slide presentation it's on our website. You can look at it, but I just wanted to make sure people understood where we got our demographic information. So this was information leading up to the enrollment study, kind of what the district had been doing. The 4K through fifth grade enrollment number, the 9-12, and then the 6-8, and then what percentage of 4K fifth grade and what that looked like. The next slide I think is one that's important. This is probably more important. These are the enrollment projections. So there's three different things you have to look at on this chart. So the line that's real jagged, those are actual numbers. And so that is 10 years worth of numbers of our kindergarten enrollment. So you can look back in 12 and 13 and 14. Earlier we were definitely above 350 for our kindergarten enrollments, and you see how it starts to trend downward. If you just look at those 10 years, so from 2012 to 2022, and you do an enrollment projection based on 10 years worth of data, you can see what the line would be. That would be the red line. That little dot below the red line is our current actual. We're not even hitting their worst case scenario from the enrollment projection. We're actually below. The blue line, they were taking 3 years worth of data. So they take they have data that's 5 years, 3 years, and then baseline, which is 10 years worth of data. It showed, because we had 1 year that it upticked, it showed it projected up. We would not want to make our decisions based on that blue line. That would not be a good way to make our decisions. And definitely we try to look at some of the conservative estimates, and that's how we try to plan, because otherwise you end up overbuilding or overstaffing as you work through this. When you go to the next one, municipal births, people say, how is this the case? So this is an interesting slide. So they look at the birth rates, and they have access to this information as demographers. What are the birth rates from 2004 at the time to 2020? And you can see that the birth rates are long-term trending down, short-term trend at the time, we're trending down. This is something that's not unique to Hudson. It's not unique to these municipalities. It's, you will find some municipalities in the state that will actually be trending even, maybe. But this is a pretty common thing with birth rates. Nobody could have projected this kind of downward trend back in right around just prior to 2008, it started going down and it never has recovered. What they told us originally, we had demographers in 2015 and we had demographers in 2018 and we had demographers in 2022. They all said typically after a recession, you start to see birth rates bounce back within about 4 years. These never bounced back after the 2008 recession. They continued to be on the decline. So then you go to the next slide, and this is again from their projections, and they did a comparison of the age structure from the 2010 to the 2020 census. So you remember this was in 2022, so this is the best data they had at the time. If there's one thing I want to point out is if you look at every age group between 25 and 50 or in 64, I'm sorry, in 55, every age group, the gray is how many people we have in 2020. The white is how many we had in 2010. So every age group between 25 and 55, we actually had fewer residents that lived in our district. Do you understand? You understand how it reads? And every age group 55 plus, we went up drastically in the number of residents we had in the district. So when people say, I don't get it, there's all this growth in Hudson, how is it not generating kids? Well, the thing that's important about that 25 to 55 group is they are the age of parents that would have kids. And when we have fewer parents in the district, it tends to mean we have fewer kids in the district. The other piece, what you're going to see here is the under fives, the 5 to 9s, and the 10 to 14s we have fewer kids in those age groups than we did in 2010 within our district boundaries. The 15 to 19s and the 20 to 24s are part of that surge or bubble that came through prior to 2008 recession. That's what, those were babies that were born in the early 2000s when we were seeing tremendous enrollment growth. And these are the classes, that 15 to 18, these are the classes that we're currently graduating out of high school now. And that's in some of the things. So sometimes people say, I don't believe the numbers. Well, this is the census numbers, and this is done by the demographer. This isn't put together by the school district. So yes, there has been tremendous amount of housing that has been developed and brought online in the school district over the last 10 years. It just hasn't yielded children for us. And that's just how it goes. So when they originally gave us their projections, they gave us kind of 5 different models. They gave us a baseline model, which was looking at a 10-year trend, what they thought our enrollment would do. And this is K5, not 4K5. This is K5. And I believe Bonnie had a number in her her enrollment was it 49 something, or it's that chart on page what? So we are not even hitting in the 25-26 school year their most conservative estimate, which was the baseline trending down. And if they would have just done it based on residential, so like number of houses being built and yield rates, you can see we would have probably 300 more students in the district than what we currently have right now. It hasn't yielded anything. The other thing that's an interesting trend, so they did this in 22. They started predicting we're going to continue to see declining enrollment. None of their models showed us over that 5 years from 22 to 27 increasing in enrollment. And that's why we started having that conversation about long term, are we going to keep all of these buildings open or are we not going to keep all these buildings open? So these were the projections. They took these all the way out to 10-year. These were their 10-year projections. That red projection that shows it going up was based on that 3-year kindergarten trend, which we haven't hit. The other 3 projections they have, this is just elementary enrollment. You can see what they are projecting to do. In the 25-26 school year, that dot shows about where we are right now. We're not even hitting their most conservative estimate or projection as it goes through. And again, these aren't numbers created by the school district. This was applied populations lab by the University of Wisconsin-Madison. So our current enrollment as of 8/20/825 is bouncing around a little bit. We picked up some kindergartners over the last couple days, and we're get excited about that, but we also know that usually the first 4 days, 5 days of school, we lose kids because some of the students that we think are coming tomorrow, if they move to another school, sometimes they don't tell us they moved. And so the people that are coming usually realize, hey, I need to register for my kid for school. So we usually know the kids that are coming. It's just we don't always know the kids that aren't coming until after school starts, about a week into school, when we start getting records requests from other districts for their transcripts and things along those lines. So right now we're somewhere between, I would say, 2 weeks ago we thought we were at 1928. Today we think we're at 1941. By the end of the week, we could be at 1941, or more than likely, we're probably going to be somewhere between 1928 and 1941 as far as elementary. And middle school has stayed basically stagnant the whole time, and the same thing with the high school. When we talk about enrollment capacity, because this is another thing that comes up, and people want to know, where do you get the enrollment capacities? These are our K-5 capacities for the buildings and where they're sitting. These are the same capacities we used in 2018 when we reboundaried the elementaries. So these are basically what we believe we would have available to us in each of the buildings for a K-5 classroom. Now, there are additional classrooms in the building that we use for other things, but this would be what we would designate for K-5 classrooms, which puts our enrollment somewhere between 2940 and 20, or sorry, not our enrollment, our capacity between 2940 and 2988, somewhere in there. And again, somebody said, well, what is it? 2940, 2988. A lot of it has to do with, could this classroom be more of a 3-5 classroom and not a K2 classroom? Well, that can hold more kids. And so it bounces around. We're within about 50 students when we look at our overall capacity. And so we try to keep really consistent in our capacities since 2018 so that people aren't asking us why are the numbers changing.
Mr. President.
Yes, Megan.
I've, gotten a couple of questions related to the enrollment and demographic projections, and this study is from 2022. So why isn't there an updated study? There's been emails to the board asking that, and I think, what I've seen in the news, what I read is, it's being talked about more nationwide, is that our birth rate in Wisconsin and in the United States as a whole has just continued to decline post-COVID. We're not recovering. So you kind of had that 2008 recession hit on the birth rate, and then you had the COVID hit on the birth rate. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah, even if you say, well, the news you're hearing around the state doesn't necessarily mean Hudson because we're close to the Twin Cities, and I just keep thinking about the higher rate of people moving here, empty nesters moving here, which the city development behind the hockey rink has proven that 180 home sites, and we netted 12 students.
Yeah, I think the first year was about 12, and I think it's somewhere between 12 and 20.
My point is, no one would predict that, right? You see all the huge development, nice development, and so that's what makes that interesting. I also hear from other communities and other school board members that they're seeing the same thing. They're going through the same thing, and some of them, to the point of, why haven't we done another study? I've read some studies from other communities that are similar to ours, and nothing has changed. Those trend lines haven't changed. So the question to ask is, what makes us think that we would have a huge bounce back? What makes us think that in 5-10 years or something, this would be to even be talking about this would be a bad decision? And I can't come up with a lot of optimism there. Anybody else?
Mr. President, I just think of the St. Croix Economic
Excuse me?
the St. Croix Economic Development group where we saw their presentation, where they were looking specifically at housing, and they did a recent study and they looked at population growth because they needed that information to understand what our housing needs were. And even that more recent study that they did for all of St. Croix County, mirrors exactly what we are seeing in this 2022. It hasn't changed, and they updated the numbers and they ran it, and it's a publicly available document, and they're out doing a roadshow around the entire county presenting it. So my point is, I think the data is still relevant, and we have other sources that continue to show this data is holding true to what they shared.
Good point, Maria. And I think we talked about adding that information, the links to the WEDC.
Yeah, I mean, they haven't made it a public document that we can link yet because they're doing all of their presentations, and they said once that's done, then we're able to link to it. So we anticipate by September we'll be able to have that linked in our website. But I think, as we do to look at this, decline enrollment's not unique to Hudson, as you said. It's not unique to Wisconsin. About 85% of school districts in Wisconsin are experiencing declining enrollment some way or another. If you follow education news around the state, you are hearing we're not the only district having the conversation about potentially having to close buildings. It is kind of the going to continue to be the new normal, and it's going to continue to be a challenge for a lot of school districts as we work through it. The facility information, again, just wanting to put it out there, and links to the summary report and links to the full report. This was a 10-year facility study that we had done by Wold Architects. This was back in 22. Again, when we were looking at facilities, they did. It was a third party that came in and they did a analysis of what our buildings needed and what they thought it would cost. So you can see on there that was at the time, looking at potentially $80+ million worth of work over the next 10 years. That's when the board at that time made the decision, hey, let's at least bite off 3 of these buildings and try to get those knocked out so we can get those done. And that was EP Rock, North Hudson, and the middle school. And then you can also see that the conversation was in the last year or two to change and to sell the district office, and so to not have to stick that money into the district office building as well. But you can see the full report. I think it's about 380 pages long. It analyzes the buildings because one of the things that we talked about, regardless of what, whatever the board decides to do, if they choose to keep buildings open or close buildings, 1 or 2, our buildings that haven't been touched yet need work. And sometimes what you'll hear in the community is, we don't need anything in our building, just keep it open. It doesn't quite work that way. When heating and cooling systems go down, you have to fix them. And we had to fix the chiller at Willow River. We just did that last year in order to maintain that building. That was a $300,000 expense. So it's people look at the buildings that we just finished and they'll say, oh my God, they're really nice. They look really nice. But about 85% of what was done in the middle school, EP Rock, and North Hudson, the dollars wise, you actually don't even see. The most expensive stuff is behind all of the finishes. It's the mechanical systems and things along those lines. And so that's just something to note, that as you are looking at these other, the last 2 buildings that need work, combined, they need about $24 million worth of work, and that was based on 2022. And so we don't have that money in our operating budget to just pay as we go. So that would mean that in order to maintain those buildings, probably long term, you're going to have to look at a facility referendum if you choose to keep them open long term. It's just something that to keep in mind, and that's why it was important to talk about the facilities. So then we get into the potential options. So back in, I think it was April or May, the board asked the administration to put together some options related to long-term facility planning and potential elementary options. We put together 5 options. This isn't an overly new document because this was a similar document that we just updated that we used in 2022 when we talked about potentially reducing elementaries in 2022, so that people could see, where are the savings or where are the reductions. At the July work session, the board chose to eliminate option 1 and eliminate option 4 in here and maintain option 2, 3, and 5, which is either go to 4 elementary buildings or go to 5 elementary, either closing just Willow or closing just Holton. And so this document is put together just to show kind of what it looks like to staff, or the differences to staff these different scenarios. It is somewhat fluid as we go through here, and you can also see about what we think roughly the savings would be, depending on which option we take. Also, when you look at what is the percent capacity, that's on the bottom for each of the options, based on what option you go with and what option the capacity, where the district would be. We prefer not to be over 90% capacity, but when you start getting below 80% capacity, you start having inefficient spaces as we try to balance out classes and things along those lines. Um, if depending on what the board decides to do, if the enrollment projections continue the way they are, the number of the percent capacity, or what we'd be at each of these options, is actually going to continue to decline because we'd have fewer students in the elementaries. So, go
Sorry,
ahead.
Mr. President. Just a quick question. When we look at the three options that are remaining, I just want to make sure there's questions that have come through about, well, what about 4K? What about wrap care? What about the other courses that happen outside of the core classroom, like art, like special education, like VIED? And so just want to affirm, in any one of those three options, we would maintain space for all of the above to effectively happen in each building.
Yeah. So going down to 4 elementaries, is obviously going to be your tightest option. I mean, very, very full. You're not going to see probably any empty classrooms. Most classrooms are going to be with something going on in there. We do account for having those types of rooms in there, and with any of the options. 4K, we believe in all the options. We can manage 4K and have in-house 4K. Wrap care creates more challenges for us, depending on if the board was to go down to 4 elementaries. We may not be able to offer as much wrap care in each of the buildings as what we've done. And the wrap care is that child care that's after or before 4K. But there are other options. We brought up in different meetings where we've talked about potentially having a centralized site for 4K. We've talked about a centralized wrap care site, potentially even at the high school, so we can incorporate some of our high school students into their practicum type classes and things like that. Not that they would be providing the childcare completely. We'd have still paid trained adults, but they would be able to help and support. So yes, I mean, if you go down to 4, yes, we believe we can accommodate our 4K and all of our sections within the class size guidelines that the board has set, which is 18 to 22 for K2, 22 to 27 for 3 through 5.
Mr. President,
Yes, Megan.
I think, one other thing from my point, I've got a kindergartner who went to meet her teacher at Holton tonight, and got a 5th grader at Willow. So all of this is brought up a lot of feelings for me internally. But when you look at our enrollments this year across class sizes, across our 6 elementaries, when we talk about like it's inefficient because we're adding a section here or we're losing a section there, I think it's also really important to keep in mind it is unequal across our schools. My kids have benefited from the small class size at Holton. That was not a design to have Holton get to have smaller class sizes than every school in the district. It's just what has happened over time. It's been awesome for kids at Holton and awesome for teachers there, I would imagine. But at the other elementary schools where their kids are always in class sizes that are close to the maximum, it ends up being very unequal for the workload of the teachers and the experience of the students. And I have a hard time with that because we are one district that our students are not getting the same class size ratios across the district. And from my understanding, by closing schools, we're not going to increase the class sizes, the class size guidelines. Instead, they would be more equal across the 4 schools.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, if you're used to having a class size of 13, and you go down to 5 or even 4 schools, there won't be any more classes of 13. But we'd still be within the class size guidelines of 18 to 22 and 22 to 27. So for some folks, they may see a decrease in the number of kids in their classes that they're used to, and in others they'll see an increase in the number of kids that are in the classes that they're used to. And I think that's a piece that is, it is important to note. I was just looking at class size guidelines. We have in different buildings, and it's not just unique to Holton or Willow River, because sometimes people say, well, their enrollment's steady or whatever it may be. It's a matter of trying to balance out the entire district. It's not just one building or another. And so I think it's important to understand that regardless of what the board decides, the decisions don't just impact Holton and Willow River. It would take, depending on whatever it is the board decides to do, a reboundering of our district. So there may be somebody that currently goes to Rivercrest and may be going to Hudson Prairie the following year. And they weren't part of either of the 2 buildings or one building or whatever that closed. It would be, it is going to be to reboundary the district to get us the most balance, to get us our most efficient setup, and working through. We keep neighborhoods together and do those types of things. But I think that's important to note. I mean, we will be, that's part of the efficiency. We will be within our class size guidelines, but we'll be more consistent within our class size guidelines.
Mr. President.
Brian? Sorry.
Dr. Willett, would you mind talking a little bit about the rebounding process? And perhaps, I'm not sure if our other board members were here the last time we did this, but just sort of I've gotten some questions about parent input or community input in the rebounding process and how we go through that. And
Yep. So we can do rebounding a couple different ways, but because it's such a substantial rebounding, that's where you utilize a third party that actually does this all the time, because it's not easy, because you have to figure out, you have to draw the boundary, and you might draw the boundary a certain way and you end up with 45 first graders but 85 second graders, and that doesn't work. So you have to draw the boundaries in a way that you're consistently getting the same grades, and that's why boundaries aren't just nice and clear all the time as you're looking at that. And we shoot to try to have boundaries last about 8 years before we have to do it again. And here we are going in, our boundaries are going into about year 8, year 7 of our last time. So we're doing pretty well with that. The process, last time we had a boundary committee. There was about 15 to 20 people that were assigned, that signed up to be on that committee. They met with a third party. They kind of made the decisions, made a recommendation to the board, and then, the board adopted that. The recommendation kind of this time around is we would work with a consultant again, with board and administration, and put to the entire community to get feedback, like 2 or 3 options. And so doing a public comment portion and a survey portion for people to give feedback on boundaries, then taking that feedback back and adjusting and trying to incorporate some of that feedback, putting it back out again to the entire community and survey group, getting more feedback on it, and then bringing something to the board that way, so that more people can have a wider say in what the boundaries look like, since it'll impact more people. It's a little different process. Same consultants either way. That process would start depending on what the board decided. If you chose not to close any buildings, or you close 1 building or 2 buildings, that process is going to start in October, and getting the information and working through that. We've already had to kind of work with third party demographers / boundary people that do this, just because they have to get some of this legwork done in time, so that if the board, when I say a legwork, they're not drawing boundaries, they're not doing that. They have to input into their systems where all our kids live. And they have to start having conversations with developers and municipalities to say, Where do you anticipate developments coming in the next 5 years and 7 years? So that legwork work has to happen regardless of what the board decides. So I don't want anybody to walk away from it thinking, oh, this is already a predetermined or anything like that. It's just that if we don't start that process now, we can't get the boundaries done in a reasonable enough time so that parents and staffing and all that stuff goes through.
Mr. President. Nick, could you talk a little bit about transportation? Like, are we going to see a huge increase in transportation costs should one or both schools close? What does that look like? And I have a list kind of here going, so I'll just give you one at a time.
Yep. So we can't get a total look at transportation until there's a decision made, because then we have to reroute the district. And we really can't even get a total look until actually boundaries are set, because once boundaries are set, then our transportation department starts working through what that looks like. We do know that, we have our most walked to building is North Hudson. And we looked at this back in 22, and we can pull more data again this fall. But our most walked to is North Hudson. And contrary to some of the notions that are out there, Willow River is not just a downtown school. The boundary for Willow River goes all the way out past the town of Hudson Town Hall in order to grab enough kids to make that building viable. And so, 60 to 70% of the kids that go to that building qualify for transportation and are transported. At Holton, 90% of those students qualify for transportation and are transported. And so what ends up happening is, it wouldn't be as though we would draw a route, and we'd say, okay, if you typically have been going to Holton, we're going to bus you to Holton to the parking lot and then turn and come north. They would redo all the routes to make them more efficient. And so could we potentially need one or two extra routes? Potentially. Or could we potentially cut one or two routes? Potentially. A route's about $60,000 a route. So somewhere, it could swing about, anywhere from 60 to 120,000 either way.
And just to make the point, there are already kids that are in these other school boundaries that are already on the bus for 45 minutes is not unheard of.
Yeah, we shoot
It's
for an
just
hour.
not. I mean, an hour, I know,
Yep.
because that seems like a really large concern for, kids riding buses much further. I just wanted to get your take on that. Could you also talk about how many, again, hard depending on what the decision is, but how would we retain teachers? Like, can we, what does that look like? Retaining teachers, how many are we looking at being able to retain if one or two schools close? Can we use all the teachers that we have in the district and our staff and keep them employed? Or are we looking at, I know HR has made comments about that, like we have people leave the district every year and contracts are up. So it sounded like before that would kind of maybe balance out all on its own. And maybe Andrea is better to speak to that.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think
Thanks.
like this year alone, we hired 33 new teachers. Based on the numbers I think that Nick had previously shared, we're not looking at that high of numbers for depending upon which option would be selected by the board. And then the 33 teachers, I mean, some years were as high as hiring. I think my highest was like 75 teachers around the time of COVID. But I would say more typical, we have about 40 hires a year.
Okay. Another question, could you talk about what would happen to the one or two buildings upon closing? Would we be looking at what are the choices there? And with that, it'll be my last question for now, at least. Talk about what happens if we all of a sudden, people want to predict we boom in population, but that might not be. I mean, if we look at the projections that are in front of us, that's not going to happen in the next 10 years. We're the kids here are the kids here, and they're going to go through. So what does that look like?
Yep. So take your first question, which was what happens to the buildings. That's an ongoing conversation. So the board would have to decide what you would like to do with them. You can put them up for sale. You can take proposals. You can list them with a realtor. You can do silent bids. You can do a variety of different things. If you decide that you want to put other school district programming in those buildings, the one thing you'll have to keep in mind is there's still facility upgrades that need to happen to those buildings. They still have to be maintained. So that is one of the challenges that come up. I can tell you with no hesitation, since you guys started talking about this very publicly in the last couple weeks, I've had 2 different developers reach out, both with interest in both facilities. I told them at this point, there's nothing I can tell you because the board hasn't made any decisions. So we don't have any buildings that are for sale. And I couldn't tell you what what we would want for them because there's been no decisions. And so, but I think there is interest. What people want to turn them into is completely up, to what the board wants to do. Similar to what happened when we were under contract with the UU property, the board asked the people that were submitting, I think, bids for the UU property to give us a proposal as to what they were going to do with it. And so they presented those proposals. So that's one of the things that you could do as a board to say, okay, we're going to, accept proposals for these buildings, if 1 or 2 or however many, and say, what is it that you're going to do with these facilities, so that we know prior to saying yes or no on some of these things. So that was the first question. The second question was, population growth. Yep.
Let's hypothetically say 4 schools are left. We have a big boom in population in 12 or 15 years. Oh my gosh, we have to build another school. And why did you do that? Why did you close a school if this is what the projection is? And what is that? What is a viable option with the 4 in place schools? Again, all hypothetically speaking here, because we're just trying to get a feel as a board on how to navigate through this.
It's there are the district has several options. So if all of a sudden we start to have this explosive population growth, which again, we don't have any data points that point to that, but if we did, it'd be a nice problem to have, first of all, because that'd mean, we're probably doing a little bit better on the financial side of things. But all 3 of the 4 remaining elementaries can be added onto. Rivercrest was designed to get an additional 6 classrooms if needed. North could add 6 classrooms onto North. EP Rock could have classrooms added onto. Hudson Prairie is a little bit more challenging just because of the way the footprint's set up. So you could add additional classrooms down the road if you needed to. And more than likely, depending on how that goes, you probably could do that without needing to go to referendum. You could probably pay for that out of fund balance if you needed to. But if we're having so much growth that we're talking about, oh my gosh, we need another school, that's a totally different conversation, and more than likely the demographics in the community have shifted quite a bit in what we're doing. I think, when you think about this, if you close 1 or 2 schools, you're saving anywhere from $2 to $3 million a year. And so you could argue that, yes, if in 12 years we needed to build something new or you needed more space, you've saved over those 12 years anywhere from $25 to $35 million that you didn't spend, or that you didn't have to spend in that process. And so it's a lot of this, people want guarantees, and we just can't give it to them. All we can do is look at the data that we have, and based on everything that we have, give our best recommendation to the board.
Just one last note, because when we talk about the need to build potentially years down the line, we also might have a school that's in rough shape that kind of can't even be updated anymore at that point. It's just something that we all deal with. Like, there's always buildings going up and buildings going down.
Yep.
Just part
absolutely.
of life.
Kate had something.
What I'm hearing from board members is a lot of questions that I think we've gotten from the community in the last 2 weeks.
Yep.
And so one that I have received is, why haven't you talked to our legislators about the different formulas that we want or advocate for? And we certainly have been talking to our legislators. We're in regular communication with them. I would say at the very least, we're talking to them yearly to have them come in and meet with us. Representative Zimmerman comes every year and talks with us. Board members went down to Madison to advocate for our board and for our community, for our districts, for our schools. And then Rob Staffschold and Shannon Zimmerman met with us separately here in Hudson. I know that Nick talks to them on a regular basis, so they are advocating for us. They certainly have always been happy to meet with us. They certainly have their limitations as well, which we're aware of, but we do try. And we do talk with them and meet with them regularly.
Yeah, absolutely, Kate. I think that is a great point. Some of the solutions, fixing the formula, things like that, those are long-term solutions, which are great, and I think we want to strive for, but we do have some short-term problems or some immediate problems. I do feel that our local legislators have tried to advocate for us down in Madison and have been supportive of public education. But again, they're one vote in a much larger machine, and it is challenging. I would say we did receive a good amount of boost this year with special ed aid and things along those lines. That's definitely been helpful. And through the governor's veto, that's definitely been helpful. But I do, it is not just if we would just talk to our local legislators, all of a sudden the problem would go away. It's just not going to work that way. And it's not a situation, I don't believe, where all of a sudden they can just in one fiscal year just change everything. There's just not enough money built into the state budget as it works that way. So, but these are definitely challenges that we have.
Mr. President.
Yes, Brian.
One thing I've been hearing from the community, and honestly, kind of, I think about it myself often. Out where I live in St. Joe, you talked about the UU property with developers. People see signs for developments, and I see those signs. Who's going to move into those houses? Nobody wants to live in those houses except for families with kids, right? And I don't see that in the data. I see the long run projections, and then I see us another 10% below those long run projections. But I'm just curious, for those of you who were here for the demographer in 2022, did they talk some about their assumptions about developers? Were they looking at, these spots in town are going to grow soon. The bridge is in St. Joe. People are going to build there. Did they make assumptions about that?
Yes, and so that's part of what happens to that that demographic study is they reach out to like the city planner, they reach out to the townships to get feedback, what projects are in the works or where do they see things. When we did this in 2018, that was a more even comprehensive look at things where they actually outlined spots in the district. There's a map out there that we have, RSP and Associates did. We believe is going to be developed in the next 5 years. It's going to be developed in the next 10 years. Some of those developments actually, they did come to fruition and they just didn't generate kids. And, our yield rate right now fluctuates somewhere between 0.2 and 0.3, 0.4 kids per unit. So even, for example, the UU property, if they build 200 units on that, and we get 0.2 kids, we're talking 40 kids, K-12, out of 200 units there. And, so then when you look at it from an elementary standpoint of roughly a third of the kids being in elementary, you're talking about, maybe that's going to help us with, 15 or so kids. And so all of those things are taken into consideration. The apartment buildings that have come online, we knew about those in 22. We knew about those actually in 18, that those were potentials that were gonna happen. They just haven't generated a lot of students for us. There's I think 88 or 100 units on the corner of Vine and Carmichael. I think there's fewer than 5 or 6 students out of that apartment complex. There's the one over off of Stage Line that just went up. Was it Shea? Is that what it's called? I don't know if we're getting any out of there. Maybe fewer than 5. That's 80 some units. And so we're not even hitting previous yield rates based on what we were getting before. So one of the things that the current demographer would do, because some of what has to happen in order for them to give us boundaries, they have to look at okay, where are the 1-year-olds, 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds living? And they try to pinpoint that. We do ask for that information. So if part of our enrollment process, when somebody enrolls their kid, one of the questions we ask, do you have any non-school age kids at home? And we're not talking about 25 and 26-year-olds that are moved back to mom and dad's house. We're talking about people, little kids that are not, in our 4K program or higher. And so we get a handle on that to the best of our ability. Now, obviously, if it's their oldest child, then we wouldn't know that until they register for school. But they have a pretty good idea when they go through that. Applied Populations, their presentation has a full methodology of what they did and how they came up with their numbers. I just pulled a couple of their slides for the purpose of tonight, but you can find their entire presentation on our website. We still have it.
Yeah, one of the interesting things back from the demography report, I was around for that, is, you would assume that a lot of our condos, townhouses would be the retirees moving in. That was how those developments were kind of planned by the city, earlier. And, families would want the 1 acre, 2 acre, 3 acre space. And it turned out to be kind of the opposite of that. We have a lot more kids in the townhouse areas instead of those larger developments. So, I mean, 20 years ago, you drive through Heritage, Greens, and you had to drive 10 miles an hour. You'd run a kid over. I mean, they're just all over. And these new developments, you just don't see it. So I think that was an interesting thing, because you can do all the planning you want as a municipality, and you can't. The lack of affordable housing forced a lot of these young families into the townhouses and apartments. So just a thought.
All right. And then
Maria, did you have a question? Go ahead.
Sorry, Nick. Quick question. I want to go back to the reboundary process. You talked about that in a helpful way to kind of unpack it, and I appreciate that. One of the questions, since we're talking about what we're hearing from folks, one of the concerns that kids says, well, my kids will be reboundaried and they won't be with their friends. And so I wonder if you could speak a little bit to a process of what does that look like? Because if we were, how we think about this decision, it becomes a reboundary for the entire school district, right? So how do we think about that? What's the approach when we think about that?
Yeah, it's that, and there is the possibility. I mean, there's no doubt about it. You were one of the people that had to be reboundaried. I think in 2018, your kids had to change elementary schools. I know when I moved here, my oldest was going into third grade. He changed elementary schools, and I think sometimes people don't give kids enough credit for the resiliency and how they tend to adapt. And I think the other piece that's interesting about our district is statistically all of our elementaries perform at about the same level. Statistically, they're about all the same. And how people, one might be ranked higher in some ranking than another, but statistically they're all high performing. And so we're very fortunate when that comes to play. When it comes to rebounding, what we try to do, and when we get feedback, and when we work with the demographers, we talk about neighborhoods, and we try not to split up neighborhoods. And so, you wouldn't run a boundary that runs right through the middle of a neighborhood. So, you wouldn't say, well, half of Red Cedar Canyon is going to go to this school and half is going to go to this school, or half of Heritage Green. You'll keep some of those, you keep those neighborhoods together. And then when you keep those together, you say, okay, if we move this whole neighborhood this direction, what does that mean we have to do to move all these different pieces? That's why it's not real easy. It's not a real easy process. And then, like I said, on top of it, you're trying to get about the same number as kindergartners, first graders, second graders, third graders in each of those boundaries. And it's not an overly easy process because, last year there was a fifth grader at the OLED house, and now this year there's no fifth grader at the OLED house. And so, in order to maintain those fifth grade numbers, they come from, different places. So I would say that, we can't guarantee that everybody would still be with their friends, but I would tell you that we keep neighborhoods together. And, that's all of our kids do come together in sixth grade. And that's what we're pretty fortunate that we have one middle school. They don't have two different feeder patterns. And so they do all come together at that point. Any other questions going into the timeline information? All right. So some people will ask, where is this all coming from? Why has it gone so quickly? I talked about in the very beginning kind of what got us to this point up to, May. But really what happened is, in May, the board said, Nick, you need to put together a timeline for us. If we want to make a decision that impacts the start of the school year in fall of 26, what does that look like? And can you lay it out for us? And also you asked for a lot of different information to provide it to you. We started putting that together in May, got it to you by July to be able to start looking at that stuff. But number one, the thing that has to happen if you want a change for the fall of 26. Now, again, you don't have to do the fall of 26. I'm just saying if you want to change for fall of 26, we would prefer knowing what it is the board would like to do by October, by the end of October. And the reason being that's the case is we need to be able to have the necessary time for operational planning, communication, and then we have our downstream decisions related to staffing. And really what happens is once a decision is made, if the board chooses to close one or close two elementaries, then what happens, then we shift into boundary mode. And that's going to take basically from whenever that decision's made in October to we need to have that decision on new boundaries done by February of 26. And the reason why we need that decision by February of 26 is because we need to understand which students are going to go to which buildings. We need to understand the building capacities, the neighborhood school designations, but we have to also we have staffing considerations that we have to start going through. We have statutorial deadlines as it relates to our certified staff as to when we have to let people know if they may be laid off. We were hoping that we would be able to do most of this through attrition, but we can't guarantee that everything would happen through attrition. And so, there are things in that we need to let staff know whether or not where they would be working and what that looks like. So if we're done, if the decision's made by February of 26, we'll know how many sections we need in each of the buildings, and we'll know what those buildings at least look like from what we need to do to staff them. Then between February and the second week of March, that's when HR kicks into gear and all the building principals, and they have to determine who teaches where. And that's why I continue to remind our staff that it's not just an impact on Holton staff or Willow River staff. I mean, somebody could be teaching at Hudson Prairie and end up teaching at Rivercrest Elementary, and neither of those two buildings were part of closures. And so, we look at staffing as a whole at the elementary level. So it regardless of what building closes, if a building closes and if two close, we then look at staff as a whole. And we look at it in different groups. Like we have our classroom teachers as a group, and then we have our specials that are in their own groups. And then some of our special groups go all the way into high school. There's some K-12 staffing things. So there are even the potential that it could impact secondary staff as well. So by February, boundaries are set. We know what we need to do to staff our buildings. And that'd take about 3 or 4 weeks so that by the second week of March in 26, we're able to let staff know this is the building we believe you'll be working in, teaching this grade, teaching this subject area for the fall of 26. Also, what will be happening almost immediately after a boundary decision is made is then transportation comes into play. And we would be since there'll be new boundaries of the district, that means all the routes are redone. And that's where it goes into the efficiency piece. And we put parameters in the system that say we don't want riders on a bus more than 1 hour. And we try to shoot to have even less than that as we work through that. And then you have to load in, okay, certain streets we can't pick up on this side of the street. Certain streets we can only go this way. We have to take a route a certain way so that the door side on a busy road is on the house side, so they don't have to cross the street and wait on a 55 mile. There's all these different considerations that come into play, and that takes several months to put together. So that going into the summer, we're feeling pretty good about what our transportation stuff is, and so that also by the end of that school year, what we try to do, and what the principals did last time with great success, is they do a lot of activities with the kids before they leave for the summer. What are they going to, they get invited to their new school if they have to change schools, and kids that aren't changing schools are still invited to the same stuff. So there can be some opportunity to ease some of that anxiety. And so all of those things come into play by the end of the school year, plus that happens over the course of the summer. And so there's a lot of moving there's a lot of moving pieces, and that's why all of a sudden that October timeline starts to become important if the change is for fall of 26. Any questions about any of the information? So a lot of this tonight was a recap of a lot of the information we've had over the last 4 or 5 meetings. Great questions by board members, which I know are coming from constituents. And we're continuing to work on a frequently asked question document. Tracy's getting that on the website. We also have at the top of the website a long-range planning tab where it links you to everything that's going on. It links you to the folder, this presentation. We recorded this meeting tonight, so if people couldn't be here, they could watch it and listen to the questions and discussion. We know that tonight was never about making any more decisions related to closing buildings or options, but tonight was really going to be making sure we get the information out again so that people have access to it. And then really the piece that now we need to transition to is community feedback. What do you guys see that looking like? What do you want it to look like? And also dates or a date when you wanted to get that feedback prior to potentially the October meeting, which is on the October meeting, which is on October 13th, is our regular board meeting.
Kate?
I put some thought into what I think a good community conversation might look like. And I took into account the last community conversation that we had. So just to refresh people's memories, we had, and I'm not sure how long ago it was. Was it 2 years ago?
Well, we did the big community.
Yes.
We did the big community conversation was in spring of 24.
Okay. So we had this meeting to discuss the school and
Oh, the school closure one? Okay,
Yes.
that was fall of 22.
Okay.
Yep,
So it
fall of
was
22.
okay.
Yep.
So to recap, we had the meeting to have discussions and talk to the community. And of course, people had questions and concerns. And we went through every single person's question in the room. I think we were there hours. And they were all good questions. And we did want to hear from people. And so I think this could be something similar, but we had a lot of questions that were repeated. And so I wonder if this is a proposal, so you can all let me know what you think, of course. But if we had tables where people would come in, they could sit down, they can discuss as a table, perhaps their main concerns, main questions, and a spokesperson from each table could stand and speak to share what kind of the overall feeling was from the table, and then 1 to 2 questions. And then as we go through the tables to discuss, maybe if people could have backup questions because they probably have similar questions from the other tables. I think that might be a good way to hear from everybody, to have people feel heard, but also to not go through that same issue where we heard from probably 200 people and had maybe 100 of the same questions.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea because I know that there are some people that like to come, they like to observe, they are not comfortable speaking. So if we had a table speaker that would get their information or their questions out there too. Megan?
Yeah, I like that idea, Kate. And I also, when I think back to the January discussion that we had where we had people work in groups and sort of like, all right, here's where we could cut. Board members were walking around or sitting at the table, same with administrators, so that there was someone there to answer their questions while they were talking through things. So I think, having board members and senior administration sitting at a table or popping by tables and being like, do you have any questions? Are there things you're thinking about? I think that helps it move more smoothly to help people get to those higher level or in some ways deeper questions because we're helping with the discussion. I don't want people to show up and feel like, oh, you made me work in a group and you didn't get my question answered. But when a board member stops by or senior administration, a whole bunch of questions might get answered from people who feel more comfortable asking them right there. And then the group is able to sort of raise those questions at the end.
Sorry,
Maria?
Megan, that's a great, I agree everything you said, and Kate as well. I like that framework. I think that what I might add on to that is a way to capture what they're talking about at the table. So we can see that either in real time, or we have, sometimes they do parking lot questions where there's just public work notebooks that they can go up and write on, and everybody can see what folks are asking, whether or not that's the question that the table elevates for public comment period. You can at least see what others are thinking, and that can help you go, okay, I want to frame it differently, or I'm thinking about this differently, layered on with engagement as we're going through and working as a table. I think that would provide some really rich discussion and insights that would be helpful for us.
Yeah, I've been parts of different brainstorming or, larger meetings where people use like a mural board or something, where you can put your little question on a sticky note. And so then that shows up on a screen or it's somewhere where people can look at it and it gets captured. I mean, not that this is a plug for mural. That's just the one that popped into my head. There's a whole bunch of free ones online.
Aaron?
I like those ideas. What I'm thinking is like ahead of time, because that sounds like a lot of questions and individual board members. I don't know that we should necessarily be answering something all, solo over here, and somebody may have a different answer. So we, like Maria's saying, like if there was a way that we knew what those questions were, I think we would vet a lot of those questions by just simply having a forum that anyone from the community could write in their question ahead of time. They get categorized and maybe slightly trimmed down, because we know how this works with the other conversations we've had, but trim them down to the basic, like there's pretty much like 10 main questions that everybody's asking. They might ask it just a little bit different, but here's those 10 questions. And start off the discussion that we're going to answer here's the 10 questions, put them all up on the board so everybody can see that. And then after that, then maybe have them go in a breakdown group to make sure that all of the questions were thoroughly answered, and then have them submit them versus 10 questions here, 8 questions here, 4 questions there, because then it allows everybody from the community to have an opportunity ahead of time, whether they can make the meeting or not, to be heard and to have their question asked.
I think so the last big meeting that Kate was talking, I think it was closer to 300 than 200. But just being out there and talking with people at different tables. I mean, some people are comfortable talking to the board members, some people aren't. But a lot of it's not, and I was running to Dave Grambo and Nick to get specifics, or even I think we had the Bray architect guy there. A lot of it is just things that we've been discussing on the board, even since you've been on the board, your new board members, that we kind of know. Sometimes it's just a historical perspective, or just correcting, is it true that, no, that's not true. But even if you don't know the answer, grab Nick or another staff member. I throw it to Tracy too, as far as, she loves it when we put her on the spot. But as far as communicating and as far as running these meetings, you've been through a number of them. Any input you have you'd like to share?
Basically, what you've described are tactics that we've used before with success. So, anytime that you can break your group into smaller groups where people feel comfortable and feel like they can more freely express themselves. The other question would be, for those folks who cannot attend, how do they provide feedback?
Kate?
I really like Aaron's idea that people who aren't there could ask questions, and maybe not even just right at that moment, but submit questions maybe a week ahead of time. And then, like you said, Aaron, to have those main questions answered right away. And then as people discuss in their groups, maybe they come up with a more detailed question in relation, or other questions that come up.
And
Megan?
I think,
Mr. President? Oh, I'm sorry, Megan. Do you want to go ahead?
I was just going to say, I think, if those questions are submitted ahead of time, and we go through them, it also makes it easy to be like, oh, these are the ones we should put on the FAQ because we got a whole bunch of these and we can post them on the website so other people can see them.
Oh,
Thanks. I really like your idea, Erin, of having a framework to kind of start us out and then having people be able to ask some questions. I also think it might be a good idea to have it broadcast, videotaped, so that those who are not there can see what was discussed.
does that have any concerns?
Are you looking at me? It's,
You looked at me like
I just,
had three
I just
eyes.
serve at the pleasure of the board. So it's whatever you guys want to do. That's your discussion.
I think it might be hard to have that one when we've got all sorts of different groups around a room. I'm not opposed to putting the information out there. If we were doing something the style like this, where people were still able to submit their questions somehow, or there's a group over here, here, and we kind of had it pod style, I think we'd be able to do that better. I mean, then if the question's not asked up here, maybe they could come forward and ask their question or pop up. If we were gonna have it recorded, I would think we would need a better format than that, because we might miss something important and
I
somebody
would
might be
agree
upset.
the format would be a problem. I'm sure Brian Delacroix and Tim Miner are having anxiety over the number of microphones to be set up and how they're going to balance out, since we've got hums and buzzes up here right now.
You could legitimate though. I mean, you wouldn't go around and record each of the individual table conversations, but there's nothing to say that you couldn't have the report out portion and the presentation portion where you're trying to answer, let's say, the 10 most common questions. You could say, okay, you're gonna live stream that piece, be a part of it. Then you're gonna pause while the groups are working at tables, and then you're gonna record again when they do the report out and ask their other questions. At the end. That's not logistically impossible for us to do.
What if we just had it here and we sent people out there to do the table thing? And we answered their questions there, so we could have the first part of it, like, here's your basic 10 questions, here's the other ones, and at the end, those questions, we can have them written down, and we can just, if maybe Tracy could share them somehow, that these were other questions that were asked. And not even necessarily have the answers, but to say that those were answered here, by board members, by the community.
Yeah, once you guys pick a date, I can tell you where you can do it. So, there's certain, that's one of the things that we'll have to kind of work through. And we can kind of finalize, we can kind of put together, Tracy and I can work on this, finalizing this format based on the feedback that you guys have given us. And then we can also tell you what we can and can't broadcast or what our capabilities are. We can work with River Channel on that. So that people know what that information is. I think one of the things that we definitely need to, before people get up from the table tonight, is set a date of when it would happen.
Can we just start with picking a day of the week? Like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday? Like, maybe just start with that?
Well, typically we don't do them on Fridays because there just wouldn't be a lot of, we just wouldn't do them on a Friday. And so,
Wednesdays
you're really,
are heavy sports nights.
yeah. And then, it's just a matter of, I know I had gotten an email, I think from Brian, you're out of town for work 18, 19?
15th, 16th.
15, 16.
15,
Monday,
16.
Tuesday.
And Bob, you're out for that whole week?
I'm off that whole week.
Okay.
I'm
So,
gone the 23rd through the 26th for a conference.
We do the 29th, which is a Monday. I mean, I feel like it's consistent with when we meet. People know when the board meets on a Monday. It's a working session. It comes after our annual meeting.
29th of September.
20 is what?
Did you say 29th of September?
Yeah.
Or the 15th.
Megan's out.
Or Bob and Brian are out.
Right. Somebody's gone.
Yeah, Bob and Brian.
I'm out the 15th.
People are gone.
And with
29th?
The
What?
29th works for me.
I was just going to raise one hesitancy that's getting pretty late
Mhm.
in the calendar. We have a couple of meetings before then. It might be nice to have the opportunity to discuss the feedback after we get the feedback. We may only have one meeting after the 29th.
When's the work
What
session?
about Tuesday, the 9th?
The 22nd.
Well, so the 22nd is the work
The work
session,
session.
but Megan's gone the week of the 22nd, correct?
Oh, sorry.
I'm here the 22nd. I'm gone the 23rd
I mean,
through the
there's
26th.
nothing that prevents you from saying, hey, you could do it on the 22nd and have that evening, and you already have it in your calendars. And if you want, we could schedule a work session either after it on the 29th. We can move the work session to the 29th if the 29th works for people. So you could have the meeting on the 22nd, process the information, and then have the work session for the October meeting on the 29th. And you still have 2 weeks before the October meeting because the way that the dates fall, this is one of those weird ones where there's 3 weeks between the work session and so
I'm good with that.
have
I
that.
like that.
So moving the work session, that's at 5:30 on the 22nd of September. We're moving the work session to the 29th, and the 22nd Monday would be the community feedback session, however we have that.
Yep.
That gives, I mean, that gives a lot of time for people to, I mean, especially over.
What's that?
I said that gives a lot of time for people over the Labor Day holiday to kind of.
Yeah,
have
I don't think you want to
converse.
I don't think you want to go too soon because again, people are still trying to get their kids into school and
Mhm.
everything else. Tracy, I don't know if you have facility calendar up at all. And the work session's that's not an issue because that'll be at the district office, but this would be something. So we've done these meetings in basically one of two areas. We've done it at the middle school. We've done most of them at the middle school. But we can absolutely, I mean, the commons area out here is designed to handle these things as well, so we could do it at the high school too, if it's available on the 22nd.
Where is it easier if we were to set up and do like we were talking about having like a broad, something,
No, and we could still do that out there. It's set up, it has
is
a
it
stage and a
available?
sound
I
system and
mean,
everything.
is it clear out there so we can schedule
As
it?
they,
If everyone here is good with it?
that's what she's checking right now. Do we know what it is? The college fair? So, I mean, it could be at the middle school then. I mean, we've done them, lots of them at the middle school. So, all right, 22nd.
Will the carpet be on in the middle school?
Yes. So the middle school, right now, tentatively in middle school, we'll finalize that. We'll get that out to the board. What I'm hearing, just so I recap this, it's going to be, we'll start out, we'll put out information. Put out information in the community after this meeting saying, hey, we'd be willing to entertain any questions that you may have. We'll come up with some type of form where they can submit that feedback, try to come up with kind of the 10 or 12, themes or questions that are around that feedback. So then when we get to the actual meeting on the 22nd, it'll be at the middle school. We'll start off just right off the bat trying to answer those 10 or 12 questions or address those 10 or 12 themes so that people have the same information they're working with in their groups. They'll be in groups similar to what we've done before where we have the lunch table set up. Probably set it up with Chromebooks again so we can have them submit their feedback right there so we have it. They're going to work in groups to come up with 2 to 3 questions, but also they're going to have a speaker that's going to come up, ask their 2 or 3 questions, but also talk about the overall themes that they had at their table, their feedback from their table. And then we'll also have off to the side a kind of a public parking lot space where people can put additional questions or things that have come up in the discussion that may not make their way through the group. Then we'll get that information and we'll get that to the board so that feedback, the board can have some additional discussion on the 29th at the work session along with anything else that is already scheduled for the 29th work session. so that you guys can decide
And
what,
televise that on the 29th, then maybe too.
yeah, we could,
I actually would like to just make that request if that's okay to do. I really like that this was able to be broadcast tonight, and I think we have a lot of really important discussions and things on our plates for the next several months. I would like to actually see the work sessions continue to be broadcast if everyone could be on board with that until at least decisions about the boundary lines have been concluded and this conversation has fizzled out. And who knows, maybe then thereafter, don't know, see how it goes. But I think it's really important for that information to be out in the community. It's important for us to be able to mind our P's and Q's up here, to correct any misinformation that's in the community and be able to refer back to our own selves at the meetings. If that's something we
I
can do.
would suggest any meeting that is discussing, the potential closure or boundaries or, is everybody okay with that? Or no? No, I don't think don't need to vote on it.
Mr. President?
Yes.
One thing, because this is, and I know we've done this before, but is there an option to provide childcare the night of the feedback session? Because it's going to be probably a lot of people who have young kids who don't want to sit through something that children think is boring grown-up talk, let's be honest. Just maybe something to throw out there as an option for families. I don't know if it's possible, but
I think that's maybe why we would
In the
have that.
past, National Honor Society provided that care. If it's at the middle school, that's easier because we can use the Hudson Prairie School Age Care space.
yeah, and what we would do is we probably would just ask people to request it ahead of time so we know about what we're dealing with. If we're going to have 10 kids or we're going to have 100 kids, it's a drastically different way in which we would staff those things.
I think that's why we would want them to submit questions ahead of time too. They could even mark on there they have kids and they're not able to attend. And that would maybe help prioritize it, not to leave anybody out. Nick, could you confirm the time? Are we gonna do 5:30 at the 22nd or 6 o'clock after dinner?
Typically, we try to go more like 6:30 or 7 for those so that people can get home, they can make dinner, they get their kids picked up,
So
and
like
it's not conflicting.
6:30?
So, it's whatever you guys want to do.
Okay.
I think if you have a young family, I think 6:30 or 7 is getting late. I think 6 is a good time.
Just a question that comes to mind. Are we, when we're asking for the community feedback, are we asking them for questions or are we asking them to come and be an advocate for the school that they want to remain open? I mean, I want to be very careful about how we present this and the mess that it can quickly turn into.
I personally think we need to allow people to give feedback. That needs to be part of this. It can't just be you can only ask questions and we're not going to entertain feedback. I understand it could go long. I understand folks have lots of opinions across this issue, but I think we need to allow that opportunity.
I agree. And I think it's important to note as well, the meeting on the 8th and then the meeting on the 13th, there's public comment opportunities.
Yep.
For people. So if people can't make that session, it's not like they can't come and, yeah.
Do we have any direction?
Mr. President, just to
No,
Megan, I think the other thing is, and we all remain available. I mean, I think all of us have been reading the emails that have come in very carefully and responding, and that always remains an avenue for everybody. And I know several of the board members often take phone calls and meet with people, and so there's a lot of open communication and dialogue and accessibility to provide feedback starting today, moving forward. So that's always an option too.
Anybody else? Okay, if someone would like to read a lot, I'd entertain a motion. I
Mr.
forgot my
President?
glasses. So.
And we'll be, and for closed session, just so everybody knows, we'll be convening in closed session. Tim, what room do we have reserved? Office conference room? Office conference room. So. All right, go ahead.
Mr. President, did you want me to read?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. The board will entertain a motion to convene in closed session. A, pursuant to Wisconsin statute 19.85, parent 1, parent E, to discuss the district properties at County Road UU and Brocky Drive. B, pursuant to Wisconsin statute 19.85, parent 1, parent F, when considering financial, medical, social, or personal histories or disciplinary data of specific persons, preliminary consideration of specific personnel problems, or the investigation of charges against specific persons, which, if discussed in public, would be likely to have a substantial adverse effect upon the reputation of any person referred in such histories or data or involved in such problems or investigations regarding a staff member. C, pursuant to Wisconsin statute 19.85, parent 1, parent F, when considering financial, medical, social, or personal history or disciplinary data of specific persons, preliminary consideration of specific personnel problems, or the investigation of charges against specific persons, which, if discussed in public, would be likely to have a substantial adverse effect upon the reputation of any person referred to in such histories or data, or involved in such problems or investigations regarding a student. D, rescheduled from 8/11/25 pursuant to Wisconsin statute 19.85, parent 1, parent C, to consider employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility regarding superintendent evaluation.
Do you have a second?
Job.
Second. Anyone?
Second.
Second, Brian. And we do a roll call for closed session. Yeah. So, Dahl,
Aye.
Garza,
Aye.
Gerlach,
Still here. Aye.
Powers, Rosowski, Rudy,
Aye.
and Bauman. Aye. We are now in closed session.